ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Game Chat. Today, here I have with me my co-host Elite. Elite, say what's up.
Hey, how you guys doing? I want to give a shout out to our Germany fan.
Yes,
How's
shout out to
things
the
going in
Germany fan.
Deutschland?
Yeah, and unfortunately, our other co-host couldn't be here today, but we have something big planned for the next episode with him. But today, I wanted to talk about football. Elite, what's on your mind with football?
Well, I forgot to ask you, Brunner, since you're such a diehard Packers fan, what did you think of Aaron Rodgers' press conference when he came back to training camp?
So, first of all, I want it on the record. I really haven't. I'm really not a Packers fan. Surprise, surprise. But you know, I'm just an Aaron Rodgers fan because I have the mentality of like an NBA mentality where it's like there's so many talented people in the league where it's like, it's like, hey, it's like even though he's not on my team, this dude's a beast. He's a badass, and I'm a fan of his because he's amazing in the game. So I wanted to bring up his notes from the press conference, and a lot of misconceptions was that that this whole situation started on draft night, but it didn't. According to Aaron, from his mouth, this issue had started in February. And he said, I desire to be more involved in conversations directly affecting my job, which makes sense. I mean, he's the face of the franchise. He's the starting quarterback. That's the person who you build around. So he said, I wanted to help the organization maybe learn from some of the mistakes in the past. In my opinion, about some of the way the outgoing veterans were treated and how we didn't retain some of the players I felt like were core players to our foundation locker room. High character guys. I'm talking Charles Woodson, Jordy Nelson, Julius Peppers, Clay Matthews, Randall Cobb, John Kuhn, TJ Lang, Brian Balaga, Casey Hayward, Micah Hyde. Guys who were exceptional players for us, great locker room guys. Many of them who weren't offered a contract or were lowballed or were maybe not given the respect on the way out. When we first talked about this situation in episode 2 or episode 1, James Jones said the same thing with Aaron. He says that he wants to be involved in, keeping some of the veterans because he said, Aaron thinks, he doesn't care who you bring in. He just wants to keep the guys who actually help the team. And some of the people he named, like Jordy Nelson, Beast, they could finish each other's sentences. Casey Hayward, he went on to go play for the San Diego Chargers, and he was a beast there. Micah Hyde, who plays in Buffalo, and he's been like an absolute beast there too. And I really wish we would have kept him. He was one of the few guys like I wish we had kept. But, and I always wonder, and I think, I'm like, why don't, we keep these guys? Like, they're important. Do you want anything, Elite?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything he said. To be perfectly honest, I think what's happened in sports over the past, we're seeing it happen in basketball, we're seeing it happen in football now, to some point baseball, is the players are getting a lot more control. And I think that's the way it should be. We're not in the days anymore of the general manager is the master behind, what's the expression? The man behind the curtain. It doesn't really work that way. It's the talent on the field. And I think what happened with Aaron Rodgers is I think Green Bay has historically been a franchise that doesn't pay players. I think they're historically love the fact that they're a small market competitive team. And what's going to bring them over that hump is they have to have talent. And when I think of the Packers, I think about the famous line that Vince Lombardi said to his daughter. His daughter said, nobody knows where Green Bay is. And he said, they will when I'm done. And if Vince Lombardi never went to Green Bay, we would have never known who the Packers were, which is really sad considering they're, I believe, the second or third oldest franchise in NFL history. And it's so when you think about this talent, you brought up some names. Now, I can make an argument. Randall Cobb past his prime. Jordy Nelson was probably right on that cusp, and that's why he's retired now. But, you know, when you think of like a Minka Hyde, Clay Matthews was probably right on that cusp. Maybe it was a good time to let Clay go. Now, but he still had a couple good years left. And I don't understand the mentality of, I'm in New England. New England fan, but I'm in New England. Do you know how many times Tom Brady took pay cuts to make contracts work for other people? And that's why Tom Brady has 7 rings. Is because they wanted to win, and the Kraft family realized this is what we need to do to win. I think the problem that Green Bay has is they don't have ownership. Their ownership is they don't have somebody to come in above the GM and say, no, we're doing this. And I think that's part of the problem, is that you have a GM is the end-all, be-all president of football operations. They might have a board of directors, but it's not like a Kraft or a Rooney or a Mira saying, no, that's what we want. And I think that's some of their problem. I personally think Aaron Rodgers, buckle up your chin straps, people. I think he's going to win an MVP this year. I think he's going to show everybody, this is who I am. Don't disrespect me. And then I think he's walking out of Green Bay.
Yeah, so like you said, Randall Cobb, yeah, he was a little past his prime. And then Clay Matthews, he's still, after Green Bay cut him, he went on to go play for the Rams, and he had a pretty decent year with the Rams. And Micah Hyde, like it's not like he got old and then like his prime went down. It's like no, like they didn't offer, like when his rookie contract was up, like they didn't offer him a better deal, so he went to go into Buffalo, and like he's a beast in Buffalo. And same thing with Casey Hayward. I mean, Casey Hayward, like went on to be a beast in San Diego, and then now, like this year or last year, like the end of his prime finally hit, and he's no longer with the team. But I mean, like that dude, held it down in San Diego. And I want to go back to Aaron. He said, I wanted to be part of conversations involving free agents, which has never happened to me in my entire career. And when I see that, I think of quarterbacks, like Tom Brady when he went to the Buccaneers recently. He said, I want Antonio Brown. And then Bruce Arians was like, he's got this thing going on, he got arrested. And he's like, no, I want him. He's my guy. And then they made it happen. I'm like, well, why can't they do that with Aaron? And then Tom Brady again, like, I want Randy Moss. Do whatever you can to get Randy Moss. And they got him. And they had an undefeated season. And then Eli Manning came along. But, I mean, still, they got Tom a weapon.
Hey, put some respect on that. David Tyree made a hell of a catch.
Like, and I think, I mean, not to drag Peyton Manning, but I listened to the Pat McAfee show, and he talks about how much of a leader and how much of a team it was, when Peyton was on the Colts. Like, he talked about the story of how, like, Peyton threw a pass to a receiver, and, like, he kind of overthrew it a little bit, but the dude tried to catch it with one hand. And so Peyton was upset by that. So, the receiver jogged back to the huddle, and Peyton pointed to the sideline and said, you're out. He said, get out. And then so, the receiver jogged back to the sideline, talked to the offense coordinator, like, no, you're in. And he's like, okay. So he jogged back to the huddle with Peyton, and Peyton pointed against the sideline. He said, you're out. And she's like, oh, guess I'm out. And so they brought in like another receiver. And I think that's like so funny. I mean, this just shows like, like a quarterback, it's his team. A quarterback is the heart of an NFL team. And they say like defense, wins games, but I mean, like, yeah, defense does, but like if you have a terrible quarterback, who doesn't know how to make decisions, or doesn't know how to throw the ball, then you're going to be screwed.
Well, and my thought about that too, though, is if you sit and think about that. So let's look at an MVP year. Last year was an MVP year for Aaron. So just to play devil's advocate, all right, he had arguably the number 1 or number 2 receiver in the NFL is a Green Bay Packer right now. Devontae Adams is a beast. Yes. And the only person that I could possibly might say is better is D-Hop. Okay. He had a running back last year that I think he cracked in the top 10 in yards. So he was a good running back but the funny thing about that is they just paid Aaron Jones. They backed the bank up and they paid Aaron.
And he took a pay cut too. Like he signed like for 3 years, a 3-year extension. Like not even like in the 100 million.
So if I was looking at the Packers team, they were 15 minutes away from a Super Bowl last year, right? Mm-hmm. They were going into the fourth quarter, yes?
No, they weren't. They were down. They were down in the fourth quarter. Aaron made a comeback. And then it was the, like, go for it. Like, they didn't decide to go for it on fourth down. They decided to kick the field goal, thinking they were going to get the ball back. Like, and then that's when Scotty Miller burned Kevin King.
So now that tells me offensively, your team was good enough to go to the Super Bowl. Okay? They fell short defensively. Mm-hmm. And so you gotta figure out two sides of the ball. And I'm sitting here scratching my head, thinking in my head, okay, you mentioned Charles Woodson. I think when Charles left Green Bay, though, yeah, I think he stuck around for a little bit, but he was never quite the player he was in Green Bay. He never hit those numbers again. But the player I think is the biggest hole they never filled back in was Clay Matthews. Because Clay Matthews was the captain of that defense, and he wore the green dot. So he was the guy calling the shots out there, and that's, I think, where they're missing that like linebacker core is really where they're kind of, I think, their biggest deficit is. I personally think generational player, a Tom Brady, an Aaron Rodgers, a Big Ben Roethlisberger, a Peyton Manning, a Danny Marino. You go to them and say, what's going to make it work for you? But on the same note, you also have to bring in that person. Like literally, we're in Hall of Fame weekend right now. And my Steelers put 2 people in the Hall of Fame this weekend. And one of those people was Troy Polamalu. And I sit back and I was seeing the highlights of the Polamalu period, and I'm like, God dang, we didn't really have to worry about much when we had Troy. And then you think about who he had as linebackers, and you think about that core there. Arguably, I hate to say this, Big Ben, both your rings came because we had great defenses. And I just don't feel the Packers have that. And that's really being the devil's advocate. That's the part of the ball they need to fix. I think they're good enough. They brought Randall Cobb back. I think they did that to make him happy. I don't know why they ever drafted Jordan Love. The guy has bust written all over him. I mean, he didn't even make the roster last year. So I think they said this year when he threw a ball in mini camps was the first time that he's played with a team in something like 18 months. And it wasn't injury related. It's just the guy, he's suspect. And I think they brought in Randall Cobb. Do I think they needed another receiver? Absolutely. It would be really nice if they had another receiver so that Devontae Adams could get open more often as opposed to double teamed. But I think they need somebody on the other side of the ball.
I keep saying like, oh, Aaron Rodgers has, the best receiver in the league, and he does. But if you recall the NFL's, 100 anniversary game when Green Bay played Chicago, it was a low scoring game. You know why? Because all the Bears had to do was double up Devontae. And then there's a clip of, of Aaron like overthrowing it to Devontae. And then Devontae literally counted the DBs that were on him. He counted 3 DBs on him. And then so that's what happened. It's like, it's like just put, your best guy or just have Devontae, double covered or triple covered. And then the offense is going to struggle.
You saw that last year with Juju Smith. As soon as Antonio Brown was out of Pittsburgh, Juju's numbers, he didn't look so super sexy because now he was the guy getting double teamed. And when you see these great teams, you see like the Patriots when they had Randy Moss, they always had that guy kind of counter setting that, or they had Rob Gronkowski. So you always have to kind of figure out where Rob is. And then when the Steelers had Antonio Brown and Juju, you had 2 guys. You got to play them straight up because you can't double team. I mean, you can have your safety cheat one way to the other, playing that hard middle and kind of cheating. Okay, I'm going to go back up this corner over here, but it just doesn't work. And that's the problem. I think they need to pick up a receiver. I think they got a good line. Their line is good. Don't they still have what's that guy with the funny last name? Bintari. Is he still there?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy's a beast. He's one of the best in the league of his position. And I mean, there's a great story about Aaron buying him a watch for protecting him, which I thought was pretty cool. But so, I mean, they have a great line. They have I'm going to say an above average to good running back. I think he's a product of the holes that he gets. I think he has kind of crappy hands. I think he needs to work on catching the ball better. And that seems to be what the running back's role is now when you look at like a McCaffrey or you look at some of these guys, pulling the ball in from the backfield. I think they need a receiver. I think if they go out and get him a receiver, I think he'd be happy. And then we might see this Packers team get that 6th ring.
Going back to what he said in the press conference, he said, I've tried to pass along information that hasn't really been used, shall we say. So I wanted to offer my services as a recruiter. And that never happened. Green Bay is not a huge vacation destination. People are coming to play with me, with our team, and knowing that they can win a championship here. The fact that I haven't been used in those discussions as when I wanted change, I felt like based on my years, by the way I can still play, I should be a natural part of the conversation. I said from the start, money obviously wasn't the problem. I didn't show up the off-season program for minicamp. To me, this was bigger. This was trying to be a resource for the organization that I care about and love so much. And then he makes an analogy. He says, talking to reporters, he says, you guys have a great year, write some great stories. Go to your boss and you say, hey, I just had an incredible year. I think I deserve a pay raise and, some security. And your boss says, we'll see. And then a couple months down the line, another job opportunity comes up. And you go back to your boss and you say, hey, I got this amazing job opportunity somewhere else. And then your boss says, whoa. We love you. We want you to stick around. Billy, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think that those are all viable points he was saying. Is Green Bay is probably the smallest city in the NFL. Population-wise, I don't know about land-wise. I just know definitely population-wise. It's a very small city. In fact, I saw a meme one time, or I heard one time, every resident from Green Bay can fit inside a Packer stadium, and it wouldn't be full. The way they fill it is they bring people in from away. And so I think about that, and I'm like, he's valid on that point. And unfortunately, you're in a sport where football is the most fudged up sport, in my opinion, in contracts. I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, but it's almost at-will employment. And what I mean by that is a GM or a team can cut you at any time and not have to honor the contract you sign. It's all about the upfront money. Where in basketball and in baseball, you have guaranteed contracts. You sign that 10-year, $130 million contract, you're getting $13 million a year for 10 years. Look at Bobby Bonilla. I mean, cry imminently. The guy's still making money. And I think that's the first problem is that these guys, it's kind of like an old timers. It's just weird the way it's done. That I think will change at some point. And then you look at it, they want more from players, but give up less. They put in that 17th game. They're not getting paid. They can't renegotiate their contract to get banged up for one more game. So they're giving up a preseason game, which most starters and second stringers didn't play in, to now have actual hits, hard hits. I personally think when I think about the NFL and I think about the Packers organization, they have to figure out what their identity really is. Are they just happy selling out games because Aaron Rodgers is there? Because you know what? You better value that and you better figure out how to make him happy, because if he's not there next year, those tickets aren't going to be there. You'll still have your season ticket holders, but I can talk to you as the older person in the room, and I can remember before Brett Favre was there, and I can remember there was blackout games with the Packers.
I really wish the NFL wouldn't let, Green Bay become like a business. They're the only team in the NFL that does it. Everybody else has owners. And that's what I feel is I feel like they're not in it to win, championships. I feel like they're in it to what's going to make us the most money. And I'd be like, well, we're not going to bring in some high level talent because we don't want to spend that big money. And then now that, I'm so glad that Aaron has done this in this press conference, because I spoke to my dad earlier because we watched it together. There's no bullshit press conference. He's just speaking, from the heart, absolute truth. And JJ Watt, who was a free agent at the time, because you said earlier, you're like, Packers need somebody on defense. And that's what I feel like we need two things. We need a wide receiver and we need an edge rusher. And I feel like if we get at least one of those two, then we're, Super Bowl bound.
And I don't even feel like they went after JJ Watt. They didn't even go after him. And he's a Wisconsin kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and again, as a Steelers fan, I'm scared when TJ comes up next year, because is he going to want to go to Green Bay? And it's like, I don't understand. I don't understand that one. Like, I thought that was a shoo-in. I remember you and I talking about it. I'm like, he's either going to Pittsburgh to play with his brother or he's going to Green Bay. And then all of a sudden, the Cardinals.
Yeah.
And then he made the stupid line of, I want to go to a competitive team.
Yeah.
Now with Kyler Murray.
Yeah. They were 8-8 last year, and then Kyler Murray's first year they were 8-7-1. So Kyler doesn't even have. I mean, he's never been up past 500.
He's 500. You can go Aaron Rodgers or Kyler Murray. JJ, you've been hitting the head too much, bro. You could have went to Big Ben and play with TJ and Derek. I don't know.
Okay, so let me ask you this: do you think Aaron Rodgers' actions were justified for missing OTAs?
Yes, because they're optional. They're optional. As soon as he had a report, he reported. As soon as it was going to hit his pocket, he reported, and as soon as it was required. So, in sports, there's two ways you stick it to the man. Is one, you hold out and just say, screw it, I'm paying the fines. We saw that with Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell did it until he got what he wanted, and then he realized very quickly the Jets wasn't what he wanted. Okay? Mm-hmm. Or you say, call your agent, and you say, you tell me everything I have to do minimally in my contract. And that's what Aaron Rodgers did.
When you brought up Le'Veon Bell, it's like, when Le'Veon Bell was a free agent, the owner said, hey, let's make it happen. Le'Veon Bell, Dude's a beast, And Adam Gase was like, well, I don't want Le'Veon Bell. And then Jets owner's like, well, I'm the owner, and I think he'll help the team. And then that's what's missing with the Packers is, and then, last time we talked about Aaron Rodgers is I told the story about T.Y. Hilton and how T.Y. Hilton was about to sign with the Ravens. And then like the GM, he made an offer, but T.Y. Hilton didn't want that. And then Jim Irsay himself had to text him an offer. He's like, oh, well, how about this? And T.Y. Hilton's like, okay, I'll resign. And, you don't have that with the Packers. It's all shareholders and board members.
And that's exactly what I said earlier is that, there's something to be said about a Bob Kraft saying, I want Tom Brady. There's something to be said about, Amira or Rooney or, some of these other guys, an Irsay, which I hate that guy. But, you think about it. But the funny thing, too, is it's weird. Is this people are shareholder in name only. So have you ever looked into buying shares of the Packers?
No, but I thought about there's a picture that got leaked for people who are interested in investing, and then apparently the Packers made something over $100 million this last off season.
Well, and it's funny is so a client of mine one time called me and he's like, hey, I'd like to buy shares of the Packers. He's a big Packer fan. And I'm like, and they don't pay dividends. They're non-transferable. It basically works one way. So it's like a shareholder in name only. There's no benefit except you get to say, you don't even get an opinion. It's not even like a preferred stock or a common stock. You don't even get to vote. You have no voting rights. And it's literally kind of one of the weirdest stocks I've ever seen in my lifetime. And so I wouldn't really say they're owned by the public because it's just not really the way it works is they don't really get a say. Because I'm sure if you polled the shareholders of the Packers, they would have said, pay Aaron Rodgers his friggin' money and give him some power. And the other thing I have to say about the Packers is I think they held McCarthy too long.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think that I think they should have had the guy, his name's slipping me. Who's the coach of the Packers right now?
Matt LaFleur.
If Matt LaFleur would have got there 2 years prior, I think you would have saw some of that transition conversation because he has conversations with Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, is literally you have an asset. So your asset right now on that team is arguably Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams' relationship. Davante Adams also isn't coming back, folks. You know that one. That he's not coming back. He saw what happened to Aaron. He's like, I'm done with this banana. And if that was my team and I was Matt LaFleur, I would sit down with them and say, hey, what plays are working and what plays aren't working? What works for you guys? Oh, you know what? Hey, I'm more of, I want a button hook. I want this. I want that. Whatever works for them. And that's what they should be playing. And they should also, the greatest thing about Peyton Manning, I don't know if Tom Brady ever got to this point. I'm pretty sure he did. Peyton Manning used to make up his own plays in the huddle. He called his own playbook.
Yeah.
So they really didn't need an offensive coordinator. They should have just paid Peyton the OC money. Why isn't Aaron Rodgers doing that? How many MVPs has Aaron Rodgers won now? 3?
Yes.
It's a 3-time MVP and you're disrespecting him like that? I mean, he literally should be able to step up and I don't care if he's drawing it on the turf and be like, hey, go over here to the garbage can and poke left. It's literally this guy knows the game probably better than 85% of the people on that field. And I just can't believe they're treating a future first ballot Hall of Famer. This guy's going to walk in the Hall of Fame 5 years after he retires. And they're treating him that way. I honestly, I was surprised he came back. He has enough money. I thought he was going to take that Jeopardy money and be like, do his own thing. But I honestly am surprised in a way he came back because they totally disrespected. You're talking about a guy who literally won you an MVP last year and almost beat the Bucks to go to the Super Bowl. And as we saw, I think they would have been good enough to beat the Chiefs in that Super Bowl. So that's all I had to say about Aaron. I think he got done dirty.
Yeah, so my next question is, do you think the Packers front office is good? And I think that our scouting is good. You know, we've drafted some excellent players. We got Rashawn Gary. We got Jair Alexander, who's, I would say, probably top 2 corner in the league. You know, we got Devontae Adams, who's now, you know, like top 2 receiver in the league. And we took him in the second round. And we got Aaron Jones, who's been a top 10, maybe top 5 running back. And he was drafted somewhat like in the 5th round. So scouting, yes. And I think, you know, that's where, you know, the front office is like, oh, you know, we'll just draft, you know, we'll try and pull out, you know, something crazy. We'll try and draft like a next Stephon Diggs. We'll try to draft this player in like the 2nd or the 3rd round. But it's like when free agents become available, when, you know, once in a generation talent like Julio Jones becomes available, and the Titans, you know, who got Julio, and they sent them a 2nd round pick, you know, I feel like you got to make a move on that.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they draft well. You have 2 types of teams out there. You have teams that win by drafting well, teams that win by getting free agents and picking the right free agents. And when I think about it, I think the Packers fall short in the latter. They don't really do good at recruiting free agents. And I think what that comes to is exactly what Aaron said, is nobody wants to go play in Green Bay. Nobody wants to freeze their ass off in December playing football in an open stadium in sub-zero weather. And if you're not using your best asset, named Aaron Rodgers, to recruit those players and getting his input, then it doesn't make sense to even try to go after him. And Julio Jones going for a 2nd rounder, there's a lot of teams that messed up on that one. There's a lot of teams. You can't really kind of call them out because I honestly thought he was going to go to New England. He wanted to play with Cam is what I heard. And so I honestly thought he was going to New England. I'm still surprised the Titans. Again, you got a bum for a quarterback. He had 1 good year. And I don't understand that one. Literally, you left Matty Ice. Oh, yeah, granted, Matty Ice isn't 3 years ago Matty Ice, 4 years ago Matty Ice. But I personally still think Matty Ice is better than Ryan Tannehill.
Okay, Elite. So my next question is, do you think this is Aaron's last year in Green Bay?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt in my mind. And I can tell you where his next destination is.
Where's it?
New England Patriots.
Really? So you're gonna think they're gonna have Mac Jones sit another year?
I think what they're going to do is bring. So first of all, Cam Newton's going to start this year. There's not going to be this quarterback controversy isn't as big as everybody talks about. I think that he's going to sit under Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton is going to go. I think Cam Newton's going to have a really good year and sign a 4 or 5 year contract somewhere else. And then I think what's going to happen is they're going to bring in Aaron Rodgers and maybe do a 2-year contract. And Mac Jones is going to hold a clipboard behind Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers is a little bit more the type of player that Mac Jones is. He has a big arm, and he's kind of mobile, but not super mobile, kind of like Aaron. I always kind of get weirded out when people call Aaron Rodgers a mobile quarterback. And then you look at a Cam Newton. No, he's not a mobile quarterback. But I personally think that's just what my gut's telling me. I personally think it all depends on what happens with Watson. I think Watson's going to end up in Philadelphia. I wish Anthony was here to talk about that. But I think he's going to end up in Philadelphia. And if he's not in jail, then he'll be the he'll be there for a few years. But that's kind of what I think. I think that he's going to go there, or I think it might be kind of funny in a way. I could also see him in Minnesota or Chicago. And just because he seems to me like the one thing I don't like about Aaron Rodgers, he kind of seems a little bit like petty. Like, you disrespected me and I'm going to stick it to you. And I could see him going there just to play them twice a year. And which I think would be a mistake, because I don't think anybody in the North division really can hold a candle to Green Bay right now. Unfortunately, the Vikings a couple of years ago had an opportunity, and I don't think that they are now. So, but that's what my gut tells me.
So yeah, I think I think this is last year, and Green Bay is going to collapse. Aaron leaves, then the guys are going to be like, "No, what's the point of re-signing?" So Aaron's going to leave, and Aaron Rodgers and Devontae posted a picture of him and Scottie Pippen, and it was a picture of the Last Dance. You know, and then another big name too on Green Bay's roster, whose contract is going to end, is Jair Alexander, and he's a top 2 corner in the league, and he's already top 2, and he's like so young. So it's either you could franchise tag Devontae Adams, because he's going to leave, and then Jair might think, "Hey, I'm going to go somewhere else." Because if they're not respecting a Hall of Fame quarterback, then they ain't going to respect me. So they're going to offer me a bunch of money, but I'm going to leave. So they could either franchise tag Devontae or Jair.
So my thought is they're going to franchise tag Devontae, is what I think. And then I think that, I kind of see this weird scenario playing out, because they get one tag. If they tag Devontae, I think Jair Alexander is going to go play for Pittsburgh. He's a Louisville, Kentucky guy, and Steelers are pretty popular in Kentucky. So I think that, I don't know if he grew up a Steelers fan, but they respect defense a lot. And then I kind of think it would be funny if they franchise tagged Alexander. Wouldn't it be funny if Devontae and Aaron ended up in New England under Belichick, the Mad Master?
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
I just think it'd be kind of funny. But we'll see. I think it's interesting of whoever. What's your prediction for the season? What do you think they're going to go?
I think that they're going to win the playoff. They're going to go to the playoffs. They're going to lose in the playoffs. And then that's going to be the end of Green Bay, because Green Bay is going to collapse.
I think they're going to go 13-4. That's the record. I feel they're going to have a 13-4 record. And I agree. I think it's going to be a collapse. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a GM get fired with a 13-4 record, because the way he handled a Hall of Famer. And we can sit here and have the debate about who's the greatest quarterback in the league right now, and half of the listeners out there are going to say, if more than half, Tom Brady, because he's got 7 rings. The best quarterback in the league right now sits in Green Bay, and he's more talented. And you just think about it: how many rings do you think Aaron Rodgers would have if he was in that same situation for all those years in New England? So that's kind of my thoughts. So, Brunner, did you have a chance to watch the Steelers game?
I did. As a Steelers fan, what did you think of your team so far?
Well, it was really kind of a weird experience. I watched it. I was kind of watching it on and off. And it was interesting to see, because none of our core players were really playing. So we didn't have any Claypool. We didn't have any, Big Ben was on the sidelines. So it was really interesting to see. I'm going to be honest. There was moments that I thought Haskins was kind of interesting. He brings a different play set. I remember there was this one play that where it was like a 2nd and 8, and he rushed for 7 yards. And it was kind of interesting to see a quarterback in Pittsburgh. We haven't seen that really since Michael Vick. So it's kind of interesting to see a quarterback run in Pittsburgh. It just doesn't happen. It's like they got cement feet. So that was kind of interesting. I was a little bit kind of like, it sucked going into the half to down 3-0, but then it seemed like we just came out and clicked. The Cowboys looked busted. Again, and they played Van Der Esch, they played some of their starters, and they just looked busted to me. I don't know how you only put up 3 points, a field goal, in 60 minutes. I was just like gobsmacked about that. I don't even know how that even. They literally started out. There was a play that they started out on the 1 yard line, had a false start, went to the 6-inch line. Okay. Next play, busted out some bootleg that ended up getting like 30 yards up. They were almost in field goal range, moving the ball great, and somehow they didn't score anything. And I just think that's going to be another season that Cowboys fans are going to be like, what the heck, an 8-8 year.
Well, it's going to be 8-9 year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
9-8.
It's going to be a 9-8 because they're not going to have a 500 year. So I guess we'll never have 500 years again anymore. Nobody will ever have a 500 again.
Very concerning for Cowboys and Jerry Jones because Dak's hurt right now. He has a shoulder injury or an elbow injury.
It's an elbow.
So you saw, who's going to step up. And you saw Garrett Gilbert, who struggled a little bit, had some potential. And then Ben DiNucci, who played last year, he showed some potential, but very, not a good time to be a Cowboys fan right now.
Where's the Red Rocket? Bring him back.
As a Steelers fan, we got to see Najee Harris, run a couple times. What did you think of Najee?
I thought he looked good. What's funny is the guy that came in after him, beginning with an M, not McCormick, had some wheels. I forget his name, but the kid had some wheels, man. And it was again, it's interesting to see. Pittsburgh is weird. Pittsburgh's a weird. I mean, I've been watching these guys for almost 50 years, and it's a weird team because if you got, I'm gonna let the listeners know something. If you want to win in the NFL, the Pittsburgh Steelers have figured out the formula. In the Super Bowl era, if you want to win in the NFL, you don't need to have the best receivers in the league. You don't need to have the best quarterback in the league. You don't need to have the best running back in the league. What you need to have is the number one defense in the league, and then you need to pound the shit out of the ball. And Pittsburgh, I think, has two thumpers right now that I think they could start pounding the ball. And that's the part we missed. Last year, we fell off because we didn't have that running back that was just kind of getting the hole. It was kind of funny as last year, oh my God, the name is slipping me. I can't believe I'm slipping on all these names. But I can remember sitting watching games with Jack and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy can't pick up a yard. You have one thing, a running back.
Are you talking about the Pittsburgh kid?
Yeah, for the Steelers guy. Who's the guy?
James Conner.
James Conner. That's the guy. And it was James Conner. And he always scared me about fumbles, and he could not pick up yards. 2 years ago, the guy was phenomenal. And last year, for some reason, he would hit the hole and get pushed back. And I wanted this guy to succeed. He's a Pittsburgh kid. He's from Allegheny County. I mean, he's a Yinzer. He went to school out there. I mean, it's just, I wanted him to succeed in the black and gold, and it wasn't meant to be. I thought he was going to be like a Rocky Blyer, and he just wasn't. He wasn't that guy. I think he's in Tennessee. Did he just sign somewhere?
Yeah, he's in Arizona right now.
Arizona, okay. And it just was like, I don't know. So we'll see. I think it's interesting. I think it was more impressive. I thought it was really cool. The whole Hall of Fame weekend, induction day was today, and it was really kind of neat to hear some of the speeches and kind of see. I hate the Cowboys, despise the Cowboys. They're not America's team. The New England Patriots right now are America's team, if anybody is. But I thought it was really cool that Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson hugged it out. They haven't spoken years, and Jerry Jones went out of his way to come and congratulate Jimmy, which I thought was pretty cool because Jimmy made that team relevant again. And it was some of the names that kind of went in. Bill Cowher going in, I thought was like, as a Steelers fan, that was just great. I already said, Polamalu, arguably, in my opinion, one of the top 3 safeties ever to play the game. Other 2, Ed Reed, Sean Taylor. But it's literally when I kind of sit there and think about the class that went in. Steve Atwood finally going in. Drew Pearson. I mean, there's a name that you young folk won't know about. Go back and watch his videos. Arguably, I hated the Cowboys because of Drew Pearson. Killed the Steelers on numerous occasions, and he was just a beast. But he never killed us in a Super Bowl when it mattered. So, I mean, some really, really great players went in, and I just thought it was really kind of neat. The one player I had kind of an issue with going in, and I might catch flack for this, so put it in the comments if you want on our Instagram. Let me know what your thoughts are. I don't think John Lynch was a Hall of Fame player. I think John Lynch was a hard hitter. I think John Lynch is a great general manager and a great front office guy. He's an above average. He wasn't even the best. He wasn't even the best safety when he played. He wasn't probably in the top 5 when he played. So it's like, I think that he got it more for front office stuff than he did because he's friends with all those people, as opposed to his playing career. Don't get me wrong, dude was a thumper. I mean, he was a thumper. He's one Super Bowl ring guy with the Bucks. But he was a Bronco for a bit. But I don't think he was really. I mean, put it this way: in Pittsburgh, the Steelers were never scared of him being out there playing safety. So, I guess is the best way to kind of put it. You could tell me your thoughts of this, Brunner. Do you think Hines Ward was scared to come across the middle because John Lynch was there? Hines Ward's going to give him a crack back and say, "Get back."
And then let's talk about dudes from my era. Let's start with Peyton Manning. Absolutely.
Yes.
First ballot.
First ballot. I mean, Peyton Manning. When you say the name Peyton Manning, what's the first thing that comes to mind to you?
Colts.
I personally think Peyton Manning. I've said this to you before, but the listeners don't know. So my holy trinity of quarterbacks, the holy trinity of quarterbacks for me, I think the greatest quarterback ever to pick up a ball in football is Dan Marino, because he was throwing balls and putting up yards that Peyton Manning broke the record from, but he was doing it in a time when it was a run-first league. Okay? Then the next guy I think is the second best quarterback ever to play the game is Otto Graham, just because he revolutionized the game, and also I think he played 11 years and went to 10 championships. So, and then my third is Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning of the modern era, I think, is the greatest quarterback ever to play the game. He had the talent and he had the ability that Tom Brady didn't have. Tom Brady has the most rings. And everybody's argument, because I live in New England, is Tom Brady's the GOAT because he has 7 rings. Well, last I knew, 22 guys play on a field at any given time. It's not one guy. Okay, so you have to look at individual accolades. Tom Brady's starting to break all these individual accolades because he's been playing forever and a day. He also played behind some pretty impressive offensive lines, so he didn't get banged up. Unfortunately, Peyton Manning got banged up. And Peyton Manning, I think back to that first year when he came out of Tennessee. First of all, he was robbed right off the bat. He should have been the number 1 draft pick. I mean, hindsight's 2020. We all know that Crazy Boy wasn't number one. He wasn't the right pick. And so he went to Indianapolis, and I think that first year he had more sacks than he did. Like, the guy was just seemed like he was on his back constantly, because back then, it's not like today, Brunner. Back then, they basically say, hey, I drafted you number one overall, so you start playing tomorrow. And as I always say to my son, you get drafted number one, number two, number three, it's because the odds are you're going to a pretty crappy team. And they need more than one player to become a good team. So what happened was Peyton became Peyton, and he started passing the ball. He had his running back also got inducted with him, Edgerrin James. Okay? Again, another guy who I don't think is a Hall of Famer. I think he's a good running back, but I don't think he was a Hall of Fame running back, in my opinion. Marvin Harrison went in last year or 2 years ago, his receiver. Dallas Clark, you're going to see go in at some point. If he's going to be going at some point. And those are all people that need to thank Peyton Manning, because they were blessed to play with Peyton Manning. Jeff Saturday, I don't know if he's in the Hall yet, but he better be. Arguably one of the best offensive linemen ever to play. Protected Peyton for all those years in Indianapolis. And I think that's probably the closest thing you see to royalty. The last feeling that I had when a player went in, like a Peyton Manning, was the year that Randy Moss went in. And that was like somebody I was super excited to see go in. And the funny thing about Peyton Manning is not only is he a great football player, the dude is funny. Like, his speeches and stuff, he's funny, dude. He loves to, like, crack on himself, man. He knows his shortcomings. And the dude's funny. The question I wonder is, do you think his brother's going to get in the Hall? Do you think Eli will be a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, absolutely. 2-time Super Bowl champion. I think he will. I mean, he didn't have, like the same type of career that Peyton had, but he still had a pretty good career. So I think he's going to go in the Hall.
I think he's like fourth or fifth all time right now.
When I think of Peyton Manning and the Colts, I think of, this is off topic, but do you think Andrew Luck will ever get in the Hall of Fame?
No, but, I think he should. I think Andrew Luck was an incredibly talented person, but I think Andrew Luck was actually one of them people that are, it's kind of funny is, I don't know how many people know, but Andrew Luck actually has like a computer engineering degree. The dude's smart. And he's like one of them guys that, Brunner, I think you and I would want to hang out with. He's a big gamer and he likes to work on computers and stuff. I think he just realized risk reward and said, hey, I've made enough money. I'm sick and tired of being hurt. And I think that's why he left.
I thought of that when you're like, Payne kept getting banged up. And I thought Andrew Luck. And another thing too is Andrew's like such a nice guy. And, and there's a video of like John Gruden when he would talk to like, draft prospects and people getting drafted. And he talked to Andrew. And then he's like, the Colts are projected, to draft you. It's like, do you think, you could fill Peyton Manning's shoes? And then he's like, well, I don't think I could ever fill Peyton Manning's shoes. There'll never be another Peyton Manning. And I just thought, I'm like what? Like an honest, thoughtful answer. Like, it's like, you guys love him. He's like, I'm not him, but I'm me. And I'm going to do, I'm going to play my heart out for this team. I think it's very unfortunate, that his career, ended so early.
And I don't know, like, I've often thought, like, I wish they would have traded him maybe. It just was those dark years for the Colts. They had it's before they got Quentin. I don't think he ever got to play with Q. So I think it's that line, they really did build up the line after him. And you kind of saw that the first year after he left, there was the guy, Jacoby Brissett, and he had a pretty good season. But the thing I always say to people, How well do you remember Peyton Manning as a player with the Colts, Brunner?
Not really. My only memory of Peyton is the Super Bowl, both Super Bowls
Okay.
when he was the Bronco.
So, which to me, that was he got a ring, but Von Miller really carried that Super Bowl. I mean, that was Von Miller's moment, and that defense shut down Cam. Cam Newton was phenomenal that year. That's probably one of the best MVP runs I ever saw. It was phenomenal. But what I always say to people is go back and look at statistically and go back and look at the stats. I don't think in a 10-year period when he was in Indianapolis, I bet you in 10 years he lost 12 games total. Those guys were like 15-1, 14-2 every freaking year.
And then Pat McAfee, he talks about that when like his rookie year was Payne's last year, and he's like, we were so good, and until we decided to lose.
And then they would seem to meet the Patriots in the playoffs, and the Patriots would stick it to them. Or there was one year the Steelers stopped them, and that was the year the Steelers went on to win a Super Bowl. And it was like good gravy. You want to talk about great football. And this is kind of my argument I always make. I don't care about the NFC. I'm an AFC guy. So to me, it's like the NFC is kind of like this revolving door of talent, like teams that come and go. And it's like, other than the 90s Cowboys, I guess you would say the 70s Cowboys, all the dynasties pretty much come out of the AFC. And I sit there and say to myself, what a great time. Big Ben was just drafted. The Steelers started clicking. I remember the day he was drafted, Big Ben was drafted. I remember I was standing at work, and I turned to a buddy of mine who was an Eagles fan, and I said, hey, Rich, guarantee you within 2 years the Steelers got their guy. They're going to win a Super Bowl. No. I said, I'll put $500 on it right now. Guess who won $500? Okay. Then
very memorable draft. The year Eli said, I'm not going to play for the Chargers.
Exactly. And then you have that same time period, you have the Patriots just won their first Super Bowl like the year before, or maybe it's 2 years before, against the greatest show on turf. And then you have Indianapolis start coming on. So literally, arguably the joke I always say, if there was no Peyton Manning in the NFL and no Tom Brady, I honestly believe the Steelers would have 8 rings right now. Okay? If there was no Tom Brady and no Big Ben, I think you'd see 5 rings on Peyton Manning's hand. So literally these 3 teams just beat the hell out of each other. And it was just and the Ravens, you had Ray Lewis coming up with that great defense with Ed Reed and Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, freaking loudmouth, T Sizzle. You know, it was a really good time for football.
And before we go, I want to talk about another guy who was inducted, who was a pretty big name, and a Mount Rushmore wide receiver in Calvin Johnson. I mean, Calvin Johnson, Megatron, dude is a beast. I think, very sad. Like, he wanted to leave. He wanted to get out of Detroit. And then Detroit just kept, franchise tagging him. And then he said, like, Aaron would always try to recruit him, like he said, I'd stand on the sideline and Aaron, said, like, come on, come over here. Or he's like, hey, why don't you come play with us, And he's like, man, and then Calvin Johnson said, man, I wish I could. But, I mean, could you imagine if Aaron Rodgers and Megatron, got together?
My 2 comments. I'm going to say the unpopular comment. I don't know if Calvin Johnson belongs in the Hall of Fame. And the only reason it's not by talent, he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest receiver ever to play the game. It's the fact that his career was so short. Okay. But that being said, do you know he's the second youngest player ever inducted in the Hall of Fame, only behind Gale Sayers? Yeah. So, I mean, but I can get over that because like me and my son had this conversation and I said the same thing. And then he's like, yeah, but he was the number one receiver in his time period. There was no doubt. There was Megatron, and then there was everybody else like 2 tiers down, it felt like. So that's kind of where I get over that. But how shitty of a franchise do you have to be to arguably run out two of the greatest players at their positions in football? They did the same thing to Barry Sanders, arguably, in my opinion, the greatest running back ever to play. And they did the same thing to Calvin Johnson. And if they would have traded Barry, I'm sure he would have played. And if they would have traded Megatron, I'm sure he would still be playing right now. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lions, you go to die I can sit and I can rattle off Lions. I mean, in the 70s, they had some good players, the Herman Moore, et cetera, so forth in the 80s. Barry Sanders, they've had good players over the time. It just never seemed to work for them. And just imagine, like, coming out of college, I don't know where Calvin was drafted. I don't know if he was number one overall. I don't remember the draft class. I'm sure you're Googling it right now.
I am.
So he played at the same time where the guy's like, playoffs. That was his coach coming out. So what was his draft number?
So he was in the 2007 draft. He was picked second overall by the Detroit Lions, and the Oakland Raiders picked Jamarcus Russell first.
That was a mistake. So what school did he come out of?
He went to Georgia.
Okay.
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. Okay. All right. So okay. But it's so you think about that, and it's like, I'd be embarrassed to be a Lions fan. Honestly, I mean, literally, you had two of the greatest players in the history. Like you say, Mount Rushmore players. You could make an argument that Megatron and Barry Sanders would be on the Mount Rushmore. You can make an argument Dan Marino, Megatron, Barry Sanders, and Vince Lombardi. That might be somebody out there's Mount Rushmore, and two of those players are basically told, pound sand, you're going to be here and lose. And you know how hard that is to say to an athlete is you're going to lose. So how great Megatron is, he was on a 1-15 team. 1-15.
Yeah.
Do you know how hard it is to go 1-15? I think he was on that 0-16 team.
Yeah, he was. Because he did an interview with Pat McAfee recently. And he's like, we lost the first 8, and we're like, come on, guys, we can pull this around. And then, they lost a couple more games, and it was a game down to the last 3 games. He's like, if we just win these last 3, I think we'll be okay, mentally. And sure enough, last game of the year, they played Green Bay.
It blows my mind. I could never picture going 0-16. Do you know how it's so hard to these guys are not going out there and just laying down. They're not patty and they're not paying patty cake. They want to win. And it's like I always say to my son is that you got to realize every friggin' player on that roster in the NFL was probably Mr. Football in their state. That's probably the best football player in every state they came from, their graduating class. Arguably, probably the best college player on their college team. Unless they went to a big school that had multiple players. You know what I'm saying? It'd just be mind-blowing.
So I want to read off quick Calvin Johnson's stats, his career stats in the NFL. He had 731 receptions, 11,619 receiving yards, he averaged 15.9 receptions. Oh, I'm sorry, 15.9 yards per reception, and he only had 83 receiving touchdowns. Not even 100. I'm surprised.
Yeah, but he only played for 6 years, 7 years. How many years did he play?
8 years.
Okay.
From 2007 to 2015.
So again, arguably on that time, I'm the worst team in NFL history in those time periods. So when I sit there and think about it, again, this is kind of a guy that, and that's exactly why I kind of sat and said, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. But then you got to look at those stats against, say, a Lynn Swann. Those are better stats than Lynn Swann had, my favorite receiver of all time. But Lynn Swann had 4 rings, and it was a different time. It was a run-first league. But the eyeball test told you Calvin Johnson was a Hall of Famer. When you saw him, that dude, man, that guy is 6'6" if he's an inch. And it seemed like he was 9 feet tall. You know, the Megatron was a perfect name for him because it literally, he was just phenomenal.
And he always wore the visor, which made him even look more threatening.
Yeah.
And then so you see this dude come on the field, and it's scary. And I don't know if you've seen him recently, but the dude looks like a super nice guy, and he's wearing glasses and everything. And I'm like, there's no way this dude. I'm like, the dude, like Megatron visor, coming up, walking the field, and like mossing 3 dudes. I'm like, no way, that's the same guy.
It's funny you say that. So he was at the thing today, induction or whatever, and he walked around a corner and he had his gold jacket on, and I looked at Jack and I'm like, who's that? Because I totally didn't recognize him. And you're right. He looks like the nicest dude. Not at all what I pictured. He's 6'5", but it just is like, that's not Megatron. That's Megadad. But it's like, nice guy. Like, did you see when he got inducted? Like when the president came and knocked on his door?
No, I didn't see that.
Funniest thing ever. So, dude still lives in Georgia, I think. I think he lives outside of Atlanta. And so it's COVID world, so didn't bring him to the hotel and do the whole like knock on the door, so they went out individually to the people's houses. And so like all of a sudden Calvin Johnson like whips the door open, is like, who's that on my lawn? Because he saw like the lights and stuff coming, and he's like, and then the guy was like, yeah, maybe we should think about this, walking up to people's houses in the dark. He's like standing there holding the baby in one hand and like just looks like a dad, And they're like, hey, welcome to the Hall of Fame. It just like it was just kind of funny to see, and I'm glad he's there. Like I said, I'm not really, I'm just surprised at 8 years he got in, but it's hard to believe it's been 5 years since he's played. That's the hard part.
So I think we had a good conversation today. We talked a lot. And anything else you want to add?
No, I think that, I would like for people to give us some input on Instagram. Give us some messages. What do you guys want to hear about? Is there anything you want to hear about? Want to know more about us? Well, I know what's up with the guy from Germany.
If you guys have any if you guys have any video suggestions or topics, let us know. DM us or comment on our posts. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.